Es folgt nun für 1,5 Minuten Frau Kollegin Kalniete.
Mr. President, Commissioner, dear colleagues, the highly disturbing events in Georgia must not be viewed in isolation. Just as Russia wages a war of aggression against Ukraine and tries to destabilize Moldova, the Kremlin is desperate to retain Georgia in its sphere of influence. I applaud the courage shown by the protesters in Georgia. Europe sees your bravery and will not turn a back on you. Your courage has stopped the passage of Kremlin's-inspired Foreign Agents Act. However, we should not be naive. The fight does not end here. These events are a potent reminder that we will never have lasting peace and security in Europe as long as these grey zones remain. The place of Ukraine, Moldova, and Georgia is firmly in the European Union. The Georgian people must continue pressing for critical reforms that will bring Georgia towards EU candidate status. Only the Georgian people can hold its leadership accountable. Only the Georgian people can challenge the might of the oligarchs. In conclusion, as a MEP from Latvia, I remember how difficult the accession process is. Allow me to remind, windows of opportunity can only arrive once or twice in a generation and do not stay open for long. I appeal to the Georgian people not to waste your window of opportunity. Thank you.
Vielen Dank, Frau Kollegin Kalniete. Es folgt für 1 Minute Herr Kollege Mixer.
Thank you, President. The degree of support in the Georgian society for the country's European aspirations has been so high that it has been very easy for years for us to support Georgia's aspirations. No serious political party has been able to fully ignore the degree of support that Georgians have expressed to the country's European future. And even those in power have always felt it necessary to pay lip service to those aspirations, even when their actions have spoken different language. We've seen problems in the area of rule of law, of independence of judiciary, media freedom, political polarization. I think the attempt by the Georgian government and governing party to adopt the so-called foreign agents law was just one example of a long list of problems in the area of rule of law in the country. What is concerning is that recently even the words, even though the draft law was dropped, even the words do not support these aspirations. The ridiculous accusations against the European Parliament and European Union will...
Vielen Dank, Herr Kollege Mixer. Es folgt für 1 Minute Herr Kollege Auštrevičius. The microphone is off, colleague. Herr Kollege Auštrevičius.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner, dear colleagues, I would like to start by congratulating the people of Georgia who, by their active stance, have stopped the government's intention to adopt a Russian-style foreign agent law. I also reiterate our solidarity and appreciation to the civil society in Georgia. Fulfilling the European will of the Georgian people, the Georgian authorities must fully implement the 12 recommendations of the European Commission, bearing in mind that the health and life of the poisoned and imprisoned Mikhail Saakashvili is an integral part of the EU requirements. Europe will not open the door to any form of political revanchism. I regret that the EU flags were burning in Tbilisi today. It is a sad day for all Georgia's friends in the European Union. Nevertheless, I believe that the historical wisdom of people of Georgia who remember the horrors of totalitarianism will take over. Thank you, Chair. I'm sorry for being late.
Vielen Dank, Herr Kollege Auštrevičius. Es folgt für 1,5 Minuten Frau von Kramon-Taubadel.
President, Commissioner, dear colleagues, all masks are finally off. The government of Georgia is determined to sabotage the country's European path. Thankfully, the people of Georgia are not taking it. There's no way back to the Russian swamp. There's no way back to the curtailed freedoms and autocracy. There's only one way forward, to Georgia's European future. The people of Georgia are so unlike their government. Everyone took to the streets to make their voices heard in Tbilisi, in Brussels, and especially in Moscow. Those in the streets of Tbilisi, Batumi, or Kutaisi spoke on behalf of over 80% of Georgians. You cannot wash away the European identity with water cannons. Burning the EU flag will not burn Europe from the Georgian hearts. Violence is futile against those who fight for their freedom. The Constitution of Georgia is sacred, and its Article 78 demands the government ensures the full integration of Georgia into the EU and into NATO. Yet the government has put the interest of one oligarch and the Kremlin above this constitution. When those in power betray their people, those people will demonstrate their power. It is time to take a cue from Georgians and fight for the European future. The people of Georgia deserve to be in the EU, even if their current government does not. Thank you for your attention.
Vielen Dank, Frau Kollegin von Kramon-Taubadel. Es folgt für eine Minute Frau Kollegin Fotyga.
President, Commissioner, full-scale invasion of Ukraine means geopolitical shift in our neighborhood. Georgian people understand it very well. It is a turning point for all of us in the region. Therefore, I pay tribute to their courage in protesting the appalling foreign agent law. I would like to mention that keeping the third president of Georgia, Mikhail Saakashvili, in prison as Putin's hostage means deteriorating future of Georgia. Hopefully, Georgian government understands it similarly to people's protests recently in Tbilisi and elsewhere. Thank you.
Vielen Dank, Frau Kollegin Fotyga. Es folgt für 2 Minuten Frau Kollegin Bonfrisco.
Grazie, Presidente. Una Georgia membro della NATO renderà gli alleati dell'Unione Europea più forti e sicuri. Questo perché le due istituzioni internazionali sono complementari attraverso un partenariato strategico indissolubile. La partecipazione all'alleanza si baserà sempre sull'impegno della Georgia verso i valori fondanti della NATO e quelli dell'Unione Europea. Stato di diritto, democrazia, diritti umani, pluralismo, società civile, apertura, trasparenza e rispetto del diritto internazionale. Da quando ha riconquistato l'indipendenza, il popolo georgiano ha scelto chiaramente e coerentemente di far parte della comunità democratica euro-atlantica. Partendo proprio dalla violazione della sovranità e dell'integrità territoriale della Georgia come dell'Ucraina, come possiamo noi realizzare un sistema più forte di sicurezza collettiva per noi e i nostri vicini, caro commissario? Oggi noi vediamo nei cittadini della Georgia fratelli europei e dobbiamo aiutarli in tutti i modi. Grazie.
Vielen Dank, Frau Kollegin Bonfrisco. Es folgt für 1 Minute Herr Kollege Wallace.
Commissioner. Georgia, like many other former Eastern Bloc countries, has not fared well under the thumb of predatory financial capitalism, crushing economic reforms and the hollowing out of the state. The NGO sector has stepped in to fill that void, and an entire middle class now is dependent on this sector and foreign funding. The initial upset about this law was about people's incomes being put in danger, not that it was pro or anti-Russian or Western. The NGO sector rallied and got the proposal retracted, while apparently charging the Georgian state with taking a dark authoritarian turn for looking at laws similar to what exists in Russia, in Australia, in the US since 1938, and may be coming to the EU sometime soon. That we've had condemnation of the law from the EU and others who either have or would happily implement similar measures is the height of hypocrisy. That this has been seized upon to inflame tensions in Georgia, which could potentially reignite the frozen conflict on its borders, is very disappointing.
Vielen Dank, Herr Kollege Wallace. Es folgt für eine Minute Herr Kollege De Graaf.
Voorzitter, deze zaal toonde zich tot op het bot geschokt over de omkoping van leden van dit parlement door Qatar. En het parlement eiste onmiddellijke maatregelen. NGO's die banden hadden met Qatar moesten worden geweerd, want dit parlement wil terecht buitenlandse beïnvloeding voorkomen. Ondertussen geeft de EU zelf miljoenen euro's aan CSO's via de EU Roadmap for Engagement with Civil Society in Georgia, om daar de politieke en culturele koers te beïnvloeden. En nu het Georgische parlement wetten wil aannemen om buitenlandse beïnvloeding te voorkomen, is dit parlement tot op het bot geschokt. Want nu komt zogenaamd de democratie in Georgië in gevaar. De hypocrisie is misselijkmakend. En ik zeg aan Georgië, doe er alles aan om de EU buiten de deur te houden, want anders wordt Georgië nog slechts een vazalstaat zonder identiteit en zonder soevereiniteit.
Vielen Dank, Herr Kollege De Graaf. Es folgt für 1,5 Minuten Herr Kollege Halicki.
Szanowni Państwo, historia i geografia nie znają próżni, szczególnie dzisiaj, kiedy mamy w Europie wojnę. Nie można lawirować między Rosją a Unią Europejską i doskonale rozumieją to Gruzini, którzy wyszli masowo na ulicę. Widzimy was, jesteśmy z wami, widzimy te flagi europejskie podniesione wysoko, które dzielnie trzymacie nawet wtedy, kiedy bije was policja i polewają zimną wodą. I z tego miejsca apel do gruzińskiego rządu. To przyszłość jest w waszych rękach. To wy jesteście odpowiedzialni za przyszłość i bezpieczeństwo Gruzji. Porzućcie rosyjską retorykę, rosyjskie prawo, bo Gruzja jest w Europie. Tego chcą Gruzini. W waszych rękach jest przyszłość narodu, ale też zdrowie prezydenta Saakaszwilego. Polski rząd pragnie go leczyć. Co wam przeszkadza? Czego się boicie, że nie dopuszczacie międzynarodowych lekarzy? Zdecydujcie się, bo gruziński naród zasługuje na bezpieczeństwo i bezpieczny rozwój. Gruzja jest w Europie i wasza odpowiedzialność dziś leży u was, na waszym stole. I nie dziwcie się, że nie będziecie partnerami dla Europy, kiedy nazywacie ją obcą agenturą.
Vielen Dank, Herr Kollege Halicki. Es folgt für 1 Minute Frau Kollegin Kaljurand.
President, Commissioner, colleagues, as the chair of the South Caucasus delegation, I have 2 messages to Georgian people. First, we members of the European Parliament know and respect the choice of closer European and transatlantic integration. You have been very clear and consistent in expressing your European aspiration. We support you and we stand with you on your European path. Second, we will never, I repeat, never drag you in any war. We remember the war of 2008 and human lives lost. We will never recognize occupation of Georgia. We will always support Georgia's sovereignty and territorial integrity. We wish Georgian people peace, security and prosperity. My message to the Georgian politicians is very clear. War in Ukraine opened a window of opportunity for Georgia. Do not waste it. Remember that today Ukrainians are fighting and dying for their future, but also for your future. Attacks on Ukraine and President Zelensky by Georgian officials are disappointing and unacceptable. Window of opportunity will not remain open forever. Do what your people expect from you. Thank you.
Vielen Dank, Frau Kollegin Kaljurand. Es folgt für 1 Minute Frau Kollegin Che.
Thank you, Chair, colleagues, Commissioner. The foreign agent law cooked up in Vladimir Putin's Russia is malicious, cynical, and oppressive. Its sole purpose is to discredit civil society and to crush dissent. So no wonder that autocrats all around the world can't seem to have enough of it. It was copied in Nicaragua, Belarus, and Egypt. And sadly, also in the EU, Viktor Orban's government passed an exact replica of this law, and it took the European court to strike it down. Because as Josep Borrell communicated it to the Georgian leaders, it's incompatible with EU values. So we very strongly welcome its withdrawal. And our parliament has a very clear message to the pro-European forces in Georgia. We see you and we stand with you. And we admire your determination to join our European family. The image of a protester in Tbilisi waving an EU flag while facing down water cannons is such a powerful symbol, colleagues. It shows how much the European project means for people in accession countries. So we should work every day to live up to this and to have a much bolder strategy to counter Russian influence, because we cannot fight Putin without fighting the Putinization of our neighborhood. Thank you.
Vielen Dank, Frau Kollegin Ceh. Es folgt für eine Minute Frau Kollegin Gregorova.
Dear colleagues, I have to say that after 4 years intensely working on getting Georgia closer to us, knowing it is also something that the citizens want, I am at loss with the situation now. It seems that whatever we do, it's a reason for Prime Minister Garibashvili to accuse us of a foul play, or for other representatives of the government to personally attack each of us. Now, after doing the right thing and reconsidering this version of the Foreign Agents Law, there is no humility. On the contrary, horrible claims how the opposition would kill a person just to cause a chaos, that we are the foreign agents interfering. I'd like to remind Georgian government one thing. We are not here against your will. You have an association agreement, DCFTA. You are eager to get a candidate status. You do everything to get closer to us, but each step you throw a stone at us. So if you want to get closer to the EU just to be able to throw stones from a short distance, I don't think we have an agreement. Pick a side, or we will stop being a choice. Thank you.
Vielen Dank, Frau Kollegin Gregorova. Es folgt für eine Minute Herr Kollege Bielan.
Mr. President, Mr. Commissioner, 15 years after an attempted coup, Georgia still faces serious political, security and economic interferences from the Kremlin. I welcome the withdrawal of the recent Kremlin-inspired law on foreign agents and the bravery of the Georgian people protesting against it. In parallel, during last plenary session, this parliament adopted with a large majority a resolution calling for the release of former Georgian President Saakashvili and his immediate transport abroad for specialist treatment. I welcome that this resolution, together with the calls from the Polish government, have borne fruit, and that Polish doctors will soon be able to examine former Georgian President's health. The EU and its member states should keep supporting democratic aspirations of the Georgian people and maintain the high dynamic of the EU enlargement process. Thank you.
Vielen Dank, Herr Kollege Bielan. Es folgt für 1,5 Minuten Herr Kollege Kubilius.
Dear colleagues, we know very well how strongly Georgian people want to join the EU. But today, Georgia as a state has a problem on the way to achieve such a strategic goal. And that problem has the name of Bidzina Ivanishvili. Unfortunately, formal and informal authorities in Georgia are united in their tactics to deliberately create new and new problems on the path of integration. That is why Mikhail Saakashvili and Nika Gvarami are kept in the prison, and that is why we recently witnessed a story with foreign agents law. Initiative of foreign agents law was a deliberate political provocation of the Georgia authorities against the people of Georgia. Such a behavior of authorities is absolutely opposite to what the EU is demanding from Georgia to depolarize political life. It's good that Georgian people in the streets manage to defend their road towards integration, but we should not be naive. This is not the last political anti-European provocation of the authorities. Prime Minister of Georgia, Mr. Garibashvili, yesterday made an important statement, quote, "The European Parliament would better take care of itself. 100 MEPs are involved in a corruption scandal. Their desire was and is to involve Georgia in the war and to destroy it together with Ukraine. Kremlin should envy for such type of propaganda, but it does not lead to the candidate status. Despite that, we shall continue to stand together with Georgian people.
Vielen Dank, Herr Kollege Kubilius. Es folgt für eine Minute Herr Kollege Sánchez Amor.
Gracias, presidente. Miren, colegas, yo me niego a esta falsa dicotomía de tener que elegir entre el expresidente en prisión, al cual muchos de los que estáis aquí sentados le recomendasteis no volver al país, y lo hizo entrando ilegalmente en medio de una campaña, y elegir entre el señor Saakashvili y un gobierno cuya deriva autoritaria es cada vez más obvia. Pero parece que estamos de acuerdo en dar apoyo a la sociedad civil, y al menos en eso, a la sociedad civil me refiero prodemocrática y proeuropea, y a partir de ahí podemos construir un consenso. Reitero que fue un error no poner a Georgia en las mismas condiciones que los otros países ofreciéndoles la candidatura, porque eso alimentó la narrativa antieuropea de Georgian Dream. Abrimos un enorme espacio para que lo llenara esa narrativa antieuropea y no sirvió, desde luego, para acabar con la polarización que tanto decíamos que nos preocupaba. Ahora tenemos que reconstruir nuestras palancas de influencia sobre el país en una situación infinitamente peor que la de hace unos meses, pero es nuestra obligación hacerlo, y yo les convoco a todos a ese apoyo a la sociedad civil sin confundirnos con falsas dicotomías. Gracias.
Vielen Dank, Herr Kollege Sánchez Amor. Es folgt für eine Minute Herr Kollege Tirtos.
Thank you, President. The release of former President Saakashvili from prison, given his fragile health, should become a prerequisite for developing our relations with Georgia. I wonder why the President of Georgia, Mrs. Salome Zurabishvili, who is also a French citizen that used to work as a diplomat in France, and the country's power broker, pro-Russian oligarch Ivanishvili, also a French citizen who has been decorated by France, refused to assist in freeing Saakashvili. There cannot be a European path for Georgia with Saakashvili, who claims that he was poisoned by Russian secret agents, slowly dying in prison. Georgia's government stands on the way of the country's European ambitions, supported by the vast majority of the people. Thank you.
Vielen Dank, Herr Kollege Tirtos. Es folgt für eine Minute Herr Kollege Bütikofer.
President, Commissioner, ironically speaking, I must say I admire Mick Wallace because he again demonstrated that he will sure as hell always position himself on the side of reactionaries, authoritarians, and oppressors. But the Georgian citizens have opted for another choice because they know that the so-called Georgian dream has turned into a Georgian nightmare. The Georgian government is paying lip service at best to European values and the European path. We should not let Georgian citizens alone in their fight for the European perspective. That is why we should consider measures beyond what's been on the table. Will we continue unabated with the development cooperation without conditionality? Will we refuse to consider sanctions? We shouldn't. And we should fight for the freedom of Saakashvili. Thank you.
Vielen Dank, Herr Kollege Bütikofer. Herrn Kollegen Swotowski sehe ich nicht. Deshalb folgt Herr Kollege Bilčík für eine Minute. Colleague Bilčík, it's applied mathematics to take the inner row to run.
President, Commissioner, colleagues, almost 20 years ago, the Georgians took to the streets in their peaceful Rose Revolution and inspired color revolutions in other countries. But some 15 years ago, Russia attacked Georgia, and today Moscow illegally occupies 20% of Georgian territory. The people of Georgia are tough fighters for freedom and democracy. They've spoken repeatedly in elections in the streets about their democratic and European ambitions. As we stand by them today, it is high time that the leaders of Georgia also stand by their own people. Georgia applied for EU membership just 10 days after Russia's brutal invasion of Ukraine. Georgians know all too well what the Russian attack and Russian propaganda and disinformation look like. We support all brave people of Georgia who are ready to fight for Europe and against the Russian meddling. The people of Georgia have proved worthy of EU candidate status years ago. It is long overdue that their leaders follow suit.
Vielen Dank, Herr Kollege Bilčík. Ich muss mich beim Kollegen Wallace entschuldigen. Wollte eigentlich eine Frage stellen und ich habe gedacht, ich wurde von den Diensten darauf hingewiesen, dass der Herr Bütikofer schon über der Redezeit war. Deshalb ist der Moment jetzt leider durch mich verpasst worden. Als nächstes spricht Herr Kollege Pizzula für 1 Minute.
Vielen Dank. Commissioner, President, colleagues, the only positive element about the political situation in Georgia is that the law on the transparency of foreign influence is withdrawn. Coping wrong solutions is never a good practice. Citizens did the right thing by standing up to it. It's good that their pressure had a positive outcome. The similarities with the original law in Russia are evident as the Russian interference in Georgia. It's unfortunate that the Georgian government is threatening the EU perspective of the country. It gives the argument to all those who advocated then unjust separation of Georgia from Ukraine and Moldova last year. Instead of working to fulfill the list of conditions to advance on the EU integration path like other 2 countries, the Georgian leaders are doing the opposite. There can be only European progress with European commitment and values. The dream of the Georgian people is Europe. Thank you.
Vielen Dank, Herr Kollege Pizzula. Es folgt für 1 Minute Herr Kollege Cañas.
Gracias, presidente. Cuando hablamos de Georgia, inevitablemente nos viene a la cabeza su etimología, el Georgios, griego, el agricultor, el que siembra, el labriego, y la metáfora de San Jorge y el dragón. Los georgianos sembraron la semilla de libertad hace 20 años y ahora están amenazados por un dragón. El latino ixun dragones, hay dragones cerca de Georgia y es un dragón que paulatinamente está erosionando su democracia con un patrón que reconocemos y que hemos visto en esta ley que ha aprobado el gobierno, o ha intentado aprobar. Por lo tanto, tenemos que ayudar a los georgianos, porque los georgianos no son santos, son ciudadanos que buscan y luchan por su libertad y luchan frente a un dragón. No volvamos a hacer lo que hicimos en 2008, que es dejarlos solos frente a aquellos que atentaron y violaron su integridad territorial, y no les dejemos solos frente a aquellos que ahora, con un proxy político, intentan erosionar y laminar el derecho que tienen a recoger la semilla de su libertad, que se llama Europa. Gracias, presidente.
Paldies. Nākamais vārds Riho Teras kungam 1 minūtei. Lūdzu.
Thank you, Vice President. Dear colleagues, over the last days we have witnessed a strong sense of protest among Georgian people against the so-called foreign agents law. Yes, we do know that the ruling Georgian team decided to pull back this draft of law, but it remains very clear that the intent of this legislative act was to silence opposition and media. Georgian government, controlled by the oligarch Ivanishvili, has turned away from the course of democracy step by step. Leaders of the opposition have suffered from the repressions by the judicial system controlled by the government. We recently heard accusations made by the Prime Minister Garibashvili against Ukrainian President Zelensky for supporting coup in Georgia. Accusations were made against this particular house for dragging Georgia into the war with Russia. Of course, these accusations are ridiculous and have no basis whatsoever, but we must continue supporting democratic processes in Georgia, even if the sitting Prime Minister does not like us and he doesn't like it. Thank you.
Paldies. Nākamais vārds Tes Roiten kungam 1 minūtei. Lūdzu.
Thank you, President, Commissioner, colleagues. Let's call this exactly what it is, a pro-Russian government parroting Russian propaganda to defend a Russian law. The Georgian people won this round, but the threat is far from over. Prime Minister Garibashvili says he wants EU candidacy. Wonderful. So do the Georgians, so do I. But make no mistake, Prime Minister, if you kill your former president, no EU candidacy. If you pass any foreign agent law, no candidacy. If you destroy democracy, no candidacy. Pro-democracy protesters are not extremists, satanists, or liberal fascists, just because they check your power grab. And absolutely nobody wants Georgia to absurdly open a second front. So stop these desperate Putinesque demonizations and make real progress on the 12 recommendations. No cosmetic fixes. And if not, Georgia's courageous people will hold you to account. Thank you.
Paldies. Nākamais vārds Svenja Hāna kundzei vienai minūtei. Lūdzu.
As a person being born in the western part of the European Union, I only know a close European Union. And I must say, I am so humbled and inspired when I see people taking to the streets, fighting for their country to take the European path. But it's their government letting them down over and over again. It's the ruling party breaking commitments on uniting the country, backing out of international agreements, and not doing the slightest bit to work for the reforms to make their way into the EU candidate. Their free media is oppressed, the political opposition is being oppressed, former President Saakashvili is being left to die in prison, an opposition leader has been detained and beaten in prison last week, and the Russian-inspired foreign agents law is just the latest tip of the Russia-inspired anti-democratic iceberg. It would massively limit NGOs, it would limit civil society, and it's only thanks to those brave people taking to the streets that this law is off the table for now. So our message today must be very clear to the government of Georgia. The international world is watching your actions very closely. And to the people of Georgia, this House stands by you in solidarity when you stand up for your freedom, for your European future. We are with you.
Nākamais vārds Ļudas Mažilis kungam vienai minūtei.
Paldies. Dėkoju pirmininkė, komisarė, kolegos. Kremlius vykdo karą, be kita ko ir hibridinį. Neabejoju, kad ir ši įtampa tarp Sakartvelo ir ES yra sukelta dirbtinai. Ji neatneša jokio konstruktyvaus rezultato nei vienai pusiai. Sakartvelas, nepaisant visų dabartinių iššūkių, nori būti ES dalimi, gyventojai remia ir narystę NATO. Pasiūlytas kontroversiškas įstatymo projektas sustabdytas, o dialogas tarp valdžios ir piliečių vyksta, tiesa, labai sunkia kaina, bet vyksta, o tolimesnė eskalacija būtų naudinga tik Rusijai. Mes ES privalome suteikti Sakartvelui daugiau negu abstrakčią europinę perspektyvą. Jau dabar yra reikalinga teikti daugiau finansinės ir techninės pagalbos, tai padės atremti naujas destabilizacijos, o kartu ir propagandos bangas. O kaip kovoti su užsienio agentų įtaka, turiu omenyje būtent Rusijos šnipus, ne kartą svarstėme ir šiuose rūmuose, tad tuo vertėtų veiksmingai užsiimti ne tik Sakartvele, bet ir kiekvienoje iš dabartinės ES valstybių. Dėkoju.
Thank you very much. Excuse me, colleague Mažilis. Would you take a blue card from Mick Wallace? No? Thank you. But I think you have 30 seconds anyway, according to the rules.
President, I wanted to make the point that Deputy Butikofer made an inaccurate statement about me. He accused me of supporting every authoritarian regime going. I'd like to inform the gentleman that I don't support any government anywhere. I've yet to see a government I like, authoritarian or otherwise. And for him to actually take that position, I mean, it actually shows a serious lack of balance. I thought he was a smarter guy than that. But I mean, and I'm not taking any sides in Georgia either, but I do believe that things work out better when we let the people of the country decide for their future for themselves. Let the people of Georgia decide.
Thank you very much. Nākamā runātāja Karina Olsson kundze vienai minūtei.
Tack, herr talman. Det är en seger för det georgiska folket att det kritiserade lagförslaget om utländska agenter dragits tillbaka. Att systematiskt attackera och undergräva civilsamhällesorganisationer är ett beprövat grepp av Kreml och all världens diktaturer. Enligt Georgiens president Salome Zurabishvili såg lagförslaget väldigt mycket ut som rysk politik. Hotet mot demokrati och mänskliga rättigheter i Georgien är på inget vis avvärjt. Över 80% av det georgiska folket vill gå med i EU. Den georgiska regeringen måste nu lyssna till det georgiska folket. Alla politiska ledare i landet har ett ansvar att förvalta. Människors längtan efter frihet och värdighet bort från Rysslands auktoritära klor måste stödjas mera ihärdigt av EU. Det finns nu ett möjlighetens fönster och då blir det en fråga till kommissionen. Hur kan kommissionen hjälpa till att strategiskt arbeta för att också uppnå detta och kandidatstatus?
Paldies. Nākamais vārds Izaskunu Bilbao Barandika kundzei 1 minūtei. Lūdzu.
Gracias. Los disturbios vividos en las últimas semanas en Georgia son un paso más de los muchos que viene dando su ciudadanía para acercarse a los valores de la Unión Europea. Nosotros, en línea con la moción aprobada en el Senado de España el pasado 2 de noviembre, a iniciativa de mi partido, pedimos que se reconozca y atienda esta trayectoria mantenida pese a la amenaza rusa. Georgia, cuando cumpla las prioridades indicadas al efecto, debe ser oficialmente candidato a la adhesión a la Unión. Desde la perspectiva emocional, para una vasca, apoyamos así a un pueblo con el que nos unen lazos profundos de amistad. Desde la de los valores europeos, lanzar un mensaje de esta importancia en aquella zona es una manifestación de apoyo y aliento a una ciudadanía que quiere mantener su libertad y que se siente mayoritariamente europea. Pero es además una inversión geoestratégica y un nuevo mensaje para el régimen de Putin. La criminal invasión de Ucrania, el neoimperialismo están cosechando un resultado completamente opuesto al pretendido. Gracias.
Okay. Thank you very much. Now, colleagues, we have a catch-the-eye procedure. I have 4 names on the list, and the first I will give the floor to Lukasz Kochut.
Zdjęcie symbol. Człowiek z europejską flagą zaatakowany fizycznie w Tbilisi. Proeuropejscy demonstranci zlani wodą i szykanowani, pomawiani, że rzekomo są zagranicznymi agentami. Bzdury. Gruzini chcą do Unii Europejskiej, chcą wolności i dobrobytu, chcą naszych europejskich wartości. Dla nich, podobnie jak dla Ukraińców, unijna flaga to jest symbol. Te dwa narody na wschodzie łączy to, że za tę flagę i za te wartości nastawiają karku. Wspieranie Gruzji jest w interesie naszego bezpieczeństwa, ale jest to także kwestia przyzwoitości. Podobnie jak wzmacnianie i budowanie silniejszej Unii Europejskiej. Od 8 lat polska i węgierska telewizja publiczna demonizują integrację europejską. Polska PiS i Węgry Fideszu robią to samo co Kreml w warstwie informacyjnej. Straszą Unią Europejską, straszą Niemcami bądź Sorosem. Unia Europejska musi być mocniejsza, musi być bardziej zintegrowana i musi być otwarta na Ukrainę, Gruzję czy Mołdawię. Dziękuję.
Thank you very much. I just would like to remind colleagues that during the when you are speaking, so you cannot show some photos or something like that. So I would appreciate if you would take in account in the future. Vlad Georgi has the next floor.
The people of Georgia are fighting for European values, and their weapons are the European flags. Their fight is non-violent, but they are very certain about their future. On the other hand, the Commissioner for Neighbourhood is silent. He doesn't fight for the Georgian people's right to be European. I would like to know what does he intend to do to show support for the Georgians that, I say again, are Europeans. I know the Commissioner's opinion about the members of this House. I would like to remind him that Orban has useful idiots, but somewhere else. They are not here. He needs to look for them somewhere else. And also, one last message. This House stands together with the Georgian people for their right to be European. It's time that the Commissioner does the same.
Thank you very much. Next speaker is Joachim Stanislav Brudzinski. Floor is yours.
Bardzo dziękuję, panie przewodniczący. Może na początek słusznie pan zwrócił uwagę jednemu z moich przedmówców, że regulamin tej Izby nie dopuszcza, aby podczas wystąpień pokazywać zdjęcia. No, niestety regulamin nie przewiduje też zakazów wypowiedzi niemądrych, żeby nie powiedzieć ostrzej, ludzi, którzy są dotknięci swoistego rodzaju ojkofobią, czyli wstrętem do własnego narodu czy do własnego rządu. Szanowni Państwo, nikt nie potrzebował tej ustawy, ona wzięła się znikąd, mogła powstać tylko na życzenie Moskwy. Ta ustawa musi być cofnięta. To słowa pani prezydent Zurabiaszwili, które skierowała do swoich współobywateli 7 marca za pośrednictwem telełączy, ponieważ przebywała wtedy w Nowym Jorku. Rzeczywiście ustawa została cofnięta, ale czy wpływy Moskwy przestały obowiązywać w Gruzji? Jest swoistego rodzaju chichotem historii, że kraj, który w 2008 roku został dotknięty napaścią ze strony putinowskich siepaczy, dzisiaj tak naprawdę ustami swoich polityków realizuje politykę Moskwy. Nie można jedną nogą być w Moskwie, a drugą wyciągać do Europy. Dzisiaj jesteśmy murem za narodem gruzińskim, ale musimy powiedzieć jasno, kraj, który dopuszcza się de facto morderstwa na swoim byłym prezydencie, nigdy miejsca w Europie mieć nie będzie. Dziękuję uprzejmie.
Thank you very much. Next speaker is Claire Daly.
Thanks, President. I have to say, I think this debate is really very unhelpful. While the odd person has come in and argued for calm and dialogue and diplomacy, most people here, quite frankly, have been happily stirring the pot with no apparent care for the consequences. Nobody, but nobody in here should be doing that. Everybody on all sides should leave Georgia be. Since 1991, the Georgian people have been put through the ringer of neoliberal shock therapy, political instability and vicious political polarisation. A third of the people in Georgia under 50 are considered emigrating. 61% of them say that no political party represents them. It is one of the most unequal countries in Europe and Central Asia. That's what we should be focusing on. That's what matters to the people of Georgia. And yet people come in here trying to inflame things. You're giving out about the Georgian Foreign Agents Act when the Commission comes out and leaks its own version of exactly the same thing, and you've nothing to say about this. This type of thing is madness. Previously, the EU argued for dialogue and de-escalation. I really hope we continue on that path.
Thank you very much. Now we